My wife told me it rained again yesterday.
What's up in War Eagle, everybody? It's your guy, Ike Jones. We are still here live at SEC Media Days 2025, talking a little bit about a recap from this first full day. Coaches are here doing their thing. Greg Sankey came and addressed everybody. Everybody, let's get straight into this and start talking a little bit about what we expect to hear. We've heard a lot of thoughts on expectations. I definitely want to hear more from you all, but let's talk about what we've heard so far. We had, of course, comments from Commissioner Greg Sankey, and a lot of the commentary, of course, has been around rev share and NIL and what the expectation should be, and what his guidance has been in regard to that. I don't know that he said anything that's been novel or earth-shattering in regard to that, but he certainly did make it seem as if there has been proper guidance given to everyone in regard to what he expects to see. And I am looking forward to seeing kind of how this all shakes out. Now, we had the privilege of getting over to the ambush event here in Auburn, and we got comments from both Hugh Freeze and AD John Cohen in regard to this, and nothing that they said is different than the things that they have been saying in regard to these things. So they are committed to the current process that exists right now, and they're going to continue to try to do the things that they feel like are best and what makes sense based upon what their understanding of all the things are. So I am looking forward to seeing kind of how all of this stuff shakes out. But what I do want to do is get into some of the comments that we got from Greg Sankey in regard to the revenue sharing things. And I want to hear I'm going to share at least a couple of comments from, though Lane Kiffin didn't have some nice things to say in regard to Coach Hugh Freeze. He did have interesting things to say in regard to what it was going to be like from a revenue sharing standpoint, or what he has experienced out there. And he seems to think that, there are a lot of people who have not been doing it the correct way out here. So we will see how that goes and really who is going to be on the right side of history when all these things shake out. But actually, let's go to the comments here from Lane Kiffin first, and then we'll go to comments that we heard from John Cohen, the AD.
Well, I think it was really level last year. So I think that in general, my guess would be you're going to be leveled out for a while, like the way that, whatever you want to call it, this supposed cap works in some ways, and some people following it, and so now some teams go out and they kind of go way above the cap way above what you would think they would do if they were monitoring their cap on a specific player. So I think because of that, now you're seeing more one-offs where the player, five-star player that traditionally would go to these couple schools now goes to this other school. Well, it's kind of like something's up, right? They're getting more money, obviously. So I think it's going to level out a little bit if this is the direction that it's going, to where you're going to see not all the players be stacked up at the top at a couple schools.
So comments there from Lane Kiffin saying that he feels as if, potentially you could see a shift in the dynamic where it's not going to be the same few schools at the top of the pecking order over and over again in terms of who's going to be in recruiting, because you've got a cap, right? Like, you just can't continue to sign these guys for these mega contracts in revenue sharing and expect to be able to replenish every single year. And this is something that, again, I think this goes along the lines of what John Cohen and Hugh Freeze have been saying. When Hugh Freeze makes the comments about, hey, look, we like the guys that are on our team right now. So I don't know that we're going to sign a class full of, all of the top recruits again. He does expect for that recruiting class to go higher. So it's not an excuse. And I think the frustrating thing I get when people hear Coach Freeze say that is he's making an excuse. He's making an excuse for why. It's not an excuse. It's an explanation for what you may see as a difference. But he is saying that they're concentrating on the guys that are in the building. And that's something similar to what Coach Lane Kiffin is saying here, is that you may see some guys go to some other schools and it may be a money decision because the cap exists there. And if people are abiding by that cap, which it seems as if some people are abiding in that way or their understanding of it and some are not, then you're going to see some drastic fluctuations when people start putting pen to paper for some of these revenue deals. But as I said, Commissioner Sankey was asked questions in regard to this. I do want to play some comments that we got from Greg Sankey in regard to what he thought was the guidance that they were giving the coaches in regard to rev share. Let's take a listen to that.
There's consensus about concerns and complaints. How's that? Yeah, it's anything new is going to create questions. It's not constant and overwhelming from all 16, but it's a continuing process. And I think the freak out factor is a little bit high, if you will. In other words, somebody writes something and people freak out. That doesn't mean it's accurate. All the cautions about, hey, you know, the Twitterverse isn't maybe the best resource all the time for information, or Xverse as it's known. There's a great deal of trust that we've built with our members, and so we can walk through questions where we don't have answers. We'll go seek those. Keep in mind that we're still in the process of implementing policies, and that's defined in the settlement with the plaintiffs and potentially the court oversight. So there's a process to be involved. I do think it's a reminder of the importance of continuing communication. And as I indicated in another answer, we'll keep adding points of communication as we go through this change. It's one of those, again, COVID lessons that you have to change your operating rhythm. So maybe rather than quarterly meetings, you're in monthly meetings. Rather than monthly meetings, you're in biweekly meetings to either give an option for questions or conversation or provide information.
So Commissioner Sankey saying there that it's an ongoing process and they're really all still learning together. And the essence of what needs to happen is making sure that the lines of communication are open between himself and the athletic directors that are involved in these programs so that they can accurately communicate things downstream to their coaches and provide guidance on the directions that they need to go in conjunction with these law firms, you know, Deloitte and such, that are going to be responsible for clearing these NIL deals. So, you know, I want to say again that I don't know that anybody has the answer on any of this stuff just yet, right? And so the assumptions that Coach Hugh Freeze or John Cohen are being arrogant in their stance and not moving in the direction that everyone else is moving, or that they're being too cautious, I think because there is so much that is unknown right now, they're operating within the confines of what they feel like is correct. And then hopefully, if there needs to be a change, that they're ready to make the pivot in the direction of that change as necessary. So I am looking forward to seeing how some of this stuff shakes out. And I definitely feel as if a lot of these conversations are going to continue to happen next week with Coach Hugh Freeze in regard to, or not next week, excuse me, tomorrow with Coach Hugh Freeze in regard to, you know, what direction he's taking as he steps in front of a larger media base that's going to have questions about the direction that the program is going in general, but they will be having NIL conversations as well. So definitely looking forward to hearing how that comes out. But, you know, we have this open here for you all today. I want to hear from you kind of what your thoughts are on things. If you've been following this so far, what are your thoughts on the things that you've heard so far? What I don't have here are, and I will get those for you all, are comments from the folks over at Vanderbilt. That includes the coach, Clark Lee, Diego Pavia. Now, there are some comments out there from Diego Pavia in regard to kind of what happened last year with winning in Auburn, and he felt as if there was a linebacker for Auburn that was talking a little bit too much before the game about what Vanderbilt needed to be able to do to win that football game, and that fired him and his team up. I am looking forward to seeing kind of maybe some retorts from some of the players in regard to some of those things. Auburn has some things that they need to prove on the field this year, for sure, without a doubt. And you know, there are teams that are confident right now that Auburn is in a place where they can beat, where they are beatable, right? And, you know, we as Auburn fans feel as if, you know, there's a pecking order in the SEC, and Auburn is in a level above the Vanderbilts, Missouris, Arkansas of the world. But, you know, of the three schools that I just mentioned, Auburn took an L to all three of them last year. Missouri, Arkansas, and Vanderbilt all beat Auburn last season. So there's not really a reason why those players on those teams that are returning, or people who are coming to that program, would really fear the Auburn game. So Auburn has some work to do in order to get themselves in a position where teams who are coming in to play at Jordan-Hare Stadium, whether that be Missouri this year or Kentucky, who that Auburn did have the opportunity to beat last season at their building, coming into Jordan-Hare Stadium actually feel as if this is a game where it's going to be difficult and they're going to have to do some work, or Auburn on the road versus Vanderbilt and Missouri and Arkansas. Can they go get win? I mean, excuse me, Missouri's coming into the building on the road versus Vanderbilt, on the road versus Arkansas. That they can go into those buildings and get wins next season, and really feel as if there is a place for some trepidation on the part of those fans and players about whether or not that outcome is going to go in the favor of those teams that they support. So, there's a lot of questions left to be answered. We will get an opportunity to hear from both coach and players tomorrow. Again, Connor Liu, Keldrick Falk, and Jackson Arnold are scheduled to be here with Coach Hugh Freeze tomorrow, and we will hear comments from all of them. Definitely would like to hear some questions that you want to get answered from those young men, the players specifically. I think Coach Hugh Freeze, and we know what people really kind of want to hear from him, but I stated earlier when someone was asking me this question, I don't know how much Coach Hugh Freeze can do and say in a setting like this that's going to change the mindsets of people who've already kind of built a narrative in their mind about what they expect to see from Auburn this season. Nothing that he says at SEC Media Days is really going to change that. He could damage it by saying something crazy, but he's been very consistent in his messaging. So I'm not sure that there's anything that he can say that would put people in a better place, a mindset, if they already had a very negative opinion or a wait and see approach for Coach Hugh Freeze. I think that's going to continue beyond SEC Media Days. They're ready to see football games to change their mind in regard to a lot of this stuff. So I too am looking forward to seeing those football games and want to see what Auburn's going to put out there on the field. But I also want to hear some conviction from some of these coaches and players. I especially want to kind of see the year over year change in the maturity of a guy like Keldrick Falk. It's not often that you get to see the same player back-to-back years at an SEC Media Day setting for Auburn. It's typically going to be a rotation of new players each and every season. So for Keldrick Falk to come a second season in a row, I think you get an opportunity really to hear maybe some of, a difference from him in his confidence in this season and lessons that he learned in this type of setting to be able to go and do that again. You don't really get a mulligan for these a lot of times. So if you don't feel like you did it well, you get an opportunity to come back in and say the right things this time, or say different things this time that'll have a different kind of impact. So I am looking forward to hearing those differences from Keldrick Falk this season, but also getting an opportunity to hear from Jackson Arnold, a guy who I have not heard a lot from in an Auburn uniform, about how he feels about his first season. There will be a ton of questions about him and for him in regard to his transition over from another SEC school into this program and making that trip to Norman. I expect to hear a lot of things, or a lot of questions be lobbed in his direction about that experience. So looking forward to seeing how he handles those things, right? Because if you're, I just mentioned a guy like Diego Papia. He has not been shy about the level of confidence that he has. He was not at SEC Media Days last year, right? When SEC Media Days was going on last season, he had really just hit the campus there in Nashville and hadn't really had an opportunity to put his stamp on that team. Now, though I think it was very evident that he was going to be the starting quarterback, they hadn't named a starting quarterback at that point in time yet. And so you didn't really get an opportunity to hear from him, but you hear a lot of confidence coming from Diego Pavia in regard to what he feels like he can accomplish. And he's been exuding that confidence all over interviews that he's had out there. And that did not, he's out here in freaking bow tie looking like he was in a tuxedo today. Like, he is definitely got a swagger about him that exudes confidence. And that's the thing that, I'm looking forward to seeing whether or not, what kind of demeanor is Jackson Arnold going to bring into SEC Media Days? Is he going to be more humble, more circumspect of like, hey, listen, I didn't have a good season last year and I have a lot to prove? Or is he going to be on the other side of that, is I didn't have a good season and I'm about to show some people, right? It can go either direction. I don't think that I really prefer one or the other, but I am interested to seeing kind of how he approaches it and what level of confidence he exudes and his ability to be able to turn the corner on those things that happened last year and move in a more positive direction this year. One of the things I loved from the ambush event that we just got an opportunity to experience, that we heard from Coach Hugh Freeze, was a thing that, and this is a thing that he gave us a kind of preview from. He said, expect to hear me say a lot tomorrow, that I really like this roster. It's something that he has said already in previous ambush events. It's something that he has said when he's had an opportunity to, whenever speaking with people about the expectations for next season, he comes back to his love of this roster. That is a drastic difference in the Coach Hugh Freeze that you heard year one about, hey, we've got to go out here and recruit, and we've got to figure out how we can close the talent gap, and all of the things about the roster that made him feel a little less confident. He is very confident in his language regarding this particular roster, and I am expecting to hear that again. He's already told us, he gave us that preview, that that's something that we should expect to hear from him about the love of this roster, which means he's acknowledging, without even saying, that this year is not going to be about the talent. It's going to be about our execution, and it's going to be about our coaching, right? And so we're expecting to see a better effort on the field from a talent standpoint. Are they going to equip those young men properly? Are they going to be able to execute on a consistent basis? And are we putting them in the right positions? Those are the things that he's saying with that. All right, let's see. I'm going to go over here to the comment section. Make sure you get comments in for anything that you all want to hear answered out here, you know, whether it is questions for me in specific or things that you want to hear me talk about when I get opportunities to get on microphones tomorrow with the players, coaches, all of those things. Definitely want to hear those things from you all. And reactions that you have from day one of SEC Media Days, definitely welcome. Forever Bankroll jumps in and says, one of my gaming bros is a journalist major at Auburn, and I asked him if he ever met any of y'all. He said he met Ike Jones. That's what's up. I don't know who that was, but tell him I said what's up. If you give me the name, maybe I'll remember it. Because I don't meet a whole lot of people out here because I'm not as present at the games and things as Mike is, unless it's a road game. I typically do those. But tell your friend I said what's up, and hopefully you'll get an opportunity to cross paths with them again. We haven't opened up, and done any sort of internship type things, but maybe that's something we could do in the future. No. Dre Gaines supposed to be there tomorrow. Okay, well, hopefully I'll get an opportunity to run into Dre, tell him to come by the Digital Drive area. We are up here. Tell him to come and holler at us and say what's up while he's here. He has access to this area, and would love to have him formally come meet the crew while we're here. Sergeant J Dog said, what did Sankey say about rev share? Sergeant J Dog played that clip a little bit earlier. The full press conference is up on the channel if you want to go check that out. But in essence, what he said is that the communication lines have been very open with both the athletic directors and coaches in regard to what their understandings are, and they're still figuring a lot of these things out. I don't think that anybody has full clarity on what's going to happen here. But the communication is just active and ongoing, and they're trying to continue to communicate as this is an evolving situation. So what he didn't say is that, there are some teams out here doing it right, and there's some other teams that are out here doing it wrong, and these are the teams that we feel like are abiding by it. He's saying that people are operating under their own understandings of what is happening, and a lot of what will be is yet to be determined, and that people really just kind of have to play a wait and see game to see kind of where it lands with all of these things. So looking forward to hearing where those things go and what direction all of those things go. One of the things I thought was interesting that Greg Sankey said during this whole process is he made a comment. I think I might have posted this on Twitter. If not, I'm going to. Oh, no, you know what? I might have it here. I think I have some additional comments on the college football playoff, right? So I did get an opportunity to sit down with Rich Clark. That interview is also on the channel if you all want to go check that out. He is the executive director of the college football playoff organization. And so I got a chance to talk with him about really kind of how the college football playoff is happening right now, what changes we can expect to see in the future. But Greg Sankey had some interesting comments that I want to play for you all in regard to some of this conversation that's happening around the CFP. So let's hear Greg Sankey on the CFP here.
As I understand, doubling down. So that was one of the phrases last week. That's part of the gambling experience, as I understand. And you always want to have a really good set of cards. You want to have a good hand to play, right? And I think we have the best hand to play. So we're going to operate consistent with the MOU. There's an allocation of those 5 spots. And I guess we'll continue to debate whether expansion beyond 12 is appropriate for the college football playoff.
So words there from Greg Sankey. The reason why this made me chuckle, right, is that without saying it again, I think what Greg saying, well, I mean, what he was saying in essence, he said, listen, someone made the comment last week, and this is directly in reference to what you heard from Big 12 Media Days about doubling down on what they feel like is the proper direction for the college football playoff, right? And he's like, I heard someone say the phrase doubling down, and in order to double down, you really should have a good hand. And he's like, I feel like we have a really good hand to play in this, right? So, listen, being able to double down with a good hand and being in this strong position, I think puts you in a very good place to be able to negotiate in terms of what's going to happen. But one of the things that he did say, in addition to that, that I thought was interesting, that's not a part of this clip, was that there is no rush. And this is something that Rich Clark said during our interview as well. There's no rush for them to change anything. If they don't change anything right now, we can just move forward with the 12-team playoff as it stands, with a slight difference in how they're going to be doing the seeding. But we can just move forward with 12 teams and not move on to, 16 or whatever the new number is going to be. We can be right where we are and not have to make any changes. So listen, one of the things that he talked about or what he mentioned in that about having the right hand, he's like, listen, I'm not forced to do anything because I'm in a really good position where I sit right now. And you need me to be able to have consensus to move forward. That's one of the things that Rich Clark talked about. He's like, if we can't get consensus, we could just keep it how it is. Like, I'm not moving forward and pushing anything that doesn't have a level of consensus where everyone feels like this is a good plan. And Rich Clark went on to say that he feels as if it doesn't really matter which option it is. They're all good things, but what is going to be the thing that all of them are going to be able to be in agreement with so that they can move forward. So we might not see a change in the college football playoff in the near term because they're so far apart. And what are going to be the things? I do wonder what the sticking points are, though. Like, right, what is going to make, it's very clear where the Big 10 wants this to go. It's very clear where the Big 12 wants this to be, right? But the swing votes, or the votes that are like the ACC, has seemed to be in allegiance with what's happening there in the Big 12. And so now the SEC becomes the vote that could tip things in one direction or the other. And Greg Sankey, I don't think he feels like he's got a good hand, but he's not revealing his cards. He also went on to say something that I thought was interesting in terms of kind of the strength of the conference and touting the numbers that the SEC has, and being the most viewed of SEC related games. They had the most views of any conference by a pretty significant margin over the other ones, and just kind of talking about the strength of the SEC as a brand. And what I'm saying to you is he understands the position that he's in, and he understands the leverage that he has in this conversation. And he's going to wield that leverage to say, if I'm not in agreement with it, I don't think nobody's going nowhere. We could just listen. If I ain't going, nobody going. That's basically what I heard from Greg Sankey today. If I ain't going, ain't nobody going. We just all going, y'all gonna have to figure out how to come together and out leverage me. But if it's just going to be me and throwing my weight around, I got the most weight in this room. And somebody has to convince me to move in a different direction from where I'm going. So thought that was very interesting from Greg Sankey. I don't know if anybody else picked up on the spiciness of that statement that I did, and maybe I'm reading too much into it. Y'all can tell me in the comment section, man. All right, bro, you tripping, man. You making too much out of it. He ain't say all that. Okay, well, listen, go listen to the full comments. Don't take the little snippet I put out there for you on this. The full comments are there on the channel. You can go watch that, listen to what he said yourself, and you can make your own evaluations about that. Comment here from Ward Dank Eagle says, you got any feelings on the idea of the SEC playing games outside of the US? I feel weird about it. Another thing that Greg Sankey talked about. Again, I love the way Greg Sankey subtly flexes, right? So he said the idea of playing games outside of the US is fine. And what I loved about what he said initially is playing games outside of the US is cool, and it seems really nice, right? But there's a great experience for college football happening in college towns, right? And so the college towns would lose revenue if they take those games and play them somewhere else. So we have to figure out a way for that to make sense and not strip what is a big portion of, revenue for these places when they're having games being played in their own space. And he was like, and then he went on to say, this was the subtle flex part of like, we do well internationally already without having to play games somewhere else. So when you think about kind of what happens in our SEC schools, we already draw interest from other places, and just playing a game somewhere else isn't going to be the thing that helps to grow the brand of the SEC. So like, yes, maybe it could help college football, but we don't need that. Maybe some of y'all do, but we don't need that. Like, let Boston College, like he didn't say this is me, but let Rutgers and Boston College go play over there where they need, what I'm saying? But we're not getting Georgia versus Bama in Scotland, bro. Like, we don't need that. So let's see what we have here. Isaac jumps in and says, it was interesting Lane Kiffin kind of saying the same thing Hugh has been saying. Yes, he is. And you know what? I think it's going to be interesting when a lot of coaches are saying the same thing that he's saying. And it's going to be interesting to hear which coaches are not saying that, right? I think that's what's going to be the storyline that I think that develops over the process of this is who's saying things that sound similar and who's saying things that sound very different, right? And then I think you'll be able to infer from those messagings which place people are in with all of the alignment on this stuff, right? So that is, to me, I do agree. Very interesting that he said some of those same things. Lawrence says bowl games could be played overseas. I don't know, man. Like, listen, the bowl games that are like those little random ones that are like, maybe you could see that happening, but like, again, it comes back to me about, is that going to mean more revenue? Right. And you got to think about like trying to get all of those young men over there to these other places to play these games, like who's footing the bill on that kind of stuff. If it's not going to make sense financially, the game isn't hurting. College football it's not like professional sports, right? Where though college football is absolutely about making money, I just don't know that college football in terms of like bowls and all that thing, they really need that international audience to be able to take them to like it's a compelling enough thing. Now, so again, some of those small bowls that are in, like, I don't know, I hate to say this, but like the Birmingham Bowl, right? Like, could that be played in Scotland and be a better experience for those young men to be able to make that kind of trip? Maybe, possibly. But like, again, somebody's going to hurt from a revenue standpoint when you take that bowl game away from them. And they're not going to add any additional bowl games with the way the college football playoff is going, because it kind of devalues some of these bowl games, right? So I don't know. I don't know where it makes sense from a financial standpoint. Let's see. Lawrence jumps back in. The Big 12 commissioner is lining some games up with some WWE matches. That's funny. Listen, I think Big 12 is one of those places where, from a revenue standpoint, no disrespect, all disrespect to the Big 12, they're not in the same financial footing as an SEC or a Big 10 is. So maybe they need to be able to do some things like that to try to figure out how to grow more interest in their brand. So I think that that's going to be an interesting thing for them. Sergeant J Dog says, I pay a lot for our season tickets and Tigers Unlimited. Flying overseas ain't happening. Yeah, I just can't see, like, I just can't see regular, like, Auburn doesn't need that. I mean, like, they're still selling out season tickets after losing two losing seasons in a row with the same coach. 4 losing seasons. Like, they don't. Why do we need to go overseas? We making money, bro. Like, and going overseas doesn't make us more money somehow, unless it changes the TV contract. If it changes the TV contract, it changes the conversation, especially when you're talking about a rev share situation, right? So if they can make a lot more money from the TV contract, maybe we could have this conversation about that. But again, the SEC and Big 10 ain't really hurting for TV contract bread. It's the Big 12 and the ACC that are in these terrible contract deals. Some of these group of 5 conferences maybe need to get better revenue. We this is a conversation that someone was having in the periphery around where we are in regards to the idea of revenue sharing and how it grows the gap between the haves and the have-nots, because there's less revenue to share for these smaller schools. They already don't have the NIL dollars to be able to compete. And if you're talking about all of the money that they have now just going to meet a revenue minimum space, it's going to be difficult for them to be able to compete and have money to share with athletes, right? That's going to be the case for not just the the vast majority of the SEC will be fine with this. They'll be able to meet that revenue share space and have NIL money on top of that. The vast majority will. And we've shared some financial things like that about this on the channel before. I forget which show it was, but you can go back and take a look at that. And we will be doing some more financial analysis stuff in the future. But that's not the case for a lot of schools in a lot of places around the country. They don't have the money to be able to do that. So what dollars they were trying to do to, make sure we have the scholarship dollars plus NIL to be able to compete, that becomes an even broader gap when you take, okay, we have to meet a minimum requirement for revenue share. And then if we have some extra money, then we can maybe try to source some NIL stuff, or those athletes can, be in a position where they can go in out and do that thing on their own. And that's not going to be the case for some schools. Some schools will have plenty to meet that minimum requirement, and they'll still have NIL dollars to be able to do outside of that through some of the things that they have with companies that are connected to their programs, right? So the have and the have-nots gap widens in that sense. And to your point, though, pay a lot of money just to be able to go to these games. So I don't know what would need to happen from a TV contract standpoint for that revenue share situation to make sense for an SEC school. That would make a lot of sense for these other schools who don't have the big TV contracts, and they'll be able to put some extra bread on the books to be able to play a game in London, right? All right, cool. Well, we'll pay a little extra to whatever company to contract you to play, 2 games per year out here at this stadium, and you'll get this, injection of revenue into your conference. I just don't see it being a thing that they need to do with the SEC and the Big Ten. Would they do it? Maybe. But does it change the equation from a TV contract standpoint to the point where it then also makes sense for the commissioners of those programs to take that revenue away from some city that typically would see that game in their own city, right? There's a balancing act there that's got to make sense. So I don't know. Madison AU Chief says, hard to get 40K to 100K fans to travel overseas to support their teams. It's going to be almost impossible. You just won't see it happen, right? And so, if you're used to having 100,000 people in a building at Neyland Stadium, why are you taking Tennessee to go play in a stadium where they're going to play in front of 30,000 and make it feel like a group of 5 school? I don't know how it makes sense, bro. Notre Dame could play in Ireland, says Sergeant J Dog. I mean, yeah, sure. But again, Notre Dame's a program where they have been independent for so long. Does it make sense? That sounds cool because of the luck of the Irish thing. And I get that you're, kind of making a joke around that, but I just don't know how that makes sense from a revenue standpoint. So I don't know. Lawrence says, if you're able to ask Hugh a question, could you ask him about his jamboree idea he had for scrimmage practice? Spring scrimmages. Yeah, we could definitely broach that conversation again with Coach Freeze. It's something that I think that he has been adamant about, and I think that there's growing consensus around a lot of the coaches around the country that is something that they would prefer to see as some sort of joint practices happening and being able to scrimmage against other players. I think that they're going to have to change the calendar a little bit for that to make a lot of sense. But, what does the future of A-Day look like? We saw a drastic change in A-Day this year. What does the future of A-Day look like? And are those things that are actively being had as far as conversations right now? I think that's a good question to be able to ask Coach Freeze for sure. I like it, Lawrence. I like it a lot. All right. Again, a lot of great things happening here. Full day one here. Day one technically, I guess, was yesterday when we were in here setting up, but it's the first full day where we were able to hear from coaches and the commissioner. We have a lot coming from day two, of course, because Auburn is going to be at the podium or at the dais or at the microphone, whatever it is on day two, starting at 12:15 when Coach Hugh Freeze steps up to do his thing. We will have some small breakout situations earlier in the day from some of the players and Coach Freeze at some of the other spaces. But as far as the one that's going to be televised, he is the second to take the podium after Kirby Smart tomorrow. So be on the lookout for that. So we will be talking about that with you all very soon. But that's it. That's all I got for you guys from day one. I will be back with day two. If you are part of our patron group of the Green Name Gang, special live for you all tomorrow night in regard to some of those things. We're going to be getting reactions from you all. You'll be able to join the conversation live here with us. So make sure that you are tapped in with that. But I'm out of here until the next time. And as always, War Eagle.